I planned my daughter's entire birthday dinner, decorated the house, and made her favorite lemon cake from scratch. When I called to say everything was ready, my son-in-law laughed and said, "We're already at her real mom's place." I sat alone with 40 candles and a cake no one touched. But 2 days later, he found out what I'd already set in motion, and he stopped laughing. The candles were still in the bag from Target when my phone lit up at 6:18 p.m. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock since 5, the way you watch a pot of water that refuses to boil. My daughter Simone had told me noon. She'd said it so casually, the way she used to tell me things when everything between us was still easy. "Come over around noon, Mom. We'll do the whole birthday thing." And I'd built an entire day around that sentence. My name is Gwen. I'm 39 years old, recently divorced, living alone in the house I grew up in after my parents left it to me. The house where Simone learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where we painted her bedroom lavender when she was 8, where every birthday until she turned 22 was celebrated with streamers and the same lemons and cream cake she requested every single year without fail. This year she was turning 30. I'd started the cake the night before. The kind of baking that isn't really about food, it's about love made edible. 3 layers, lemon curd between each one, buttercream that took me 2 tries to get smooth enough. I piped little roses along the bottom edge because she used to love watching me do that when she was small. She'd press her finger into the extra frosting on the spatula and declare it perfect. I wasn't just making a cake, I was making 30 years of something. The table looked beautiful. I'd found a dusty rose tablecloth at HomeGoods that matched the flowers I'd cut from the yard. Her favorite playlist was queued up on the speaker. I'd made the braised short ribs she always asked for at Christmas, roasted fingerling potatoes, a salad with candied pecans because I knew she loved the crunch. At 5 o'clock I started to worry. At 5:30 I told myself traffic. At 6 I called. It rang 4 times before my son-in-law Marcus answered. In the background I could hear dishes, conversation, someone's kid shrieking with laughter, a party happening somewhere else. "Hey, Gwen." His voice was flat in the way voices get when someone is holding something back. "Marcus, is everything okay?" Simone said noon and I've been, "Yeah, about that." He exhaled slowly. We ended up going to Cheryl, my ex-husband's girlfriend. The woman he'd been seeing for 3 years, who had 2 grown kids of her own and a big house in Scottsdale, with a pool and a patio she'd just had redone. "Simone's mom and all her sisters are here," he continued, "and it kind of turned into a whole thing. You know how it gets." I didn't speak for a moment. My throat had done something complicated. "Can I talk to her?" "She's kind of in the middle of things right now." A pause. She says, happy to reschedule. My daughter's 30th birthday. That's the one I'd spent 4 days preparing for. "Marcus." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "She knows I've been cooking all day." I know. But Cheryl went all out. She rented one of those dessert carts, the ones that come to your house. It's kind of a whole production. He lowered his voice slightly, like he was being considerate. "It's her real family, We'll do something with you next weekend, her real family." I set the phone down on the counter and stood very still. The short ribs were still warm in the Dutch oven. The cake sat on its stand in the center of the table. The little buttercream roses I'd spent 40 minutes piping catching the light from the overhead fixture. Real family. Cheryl had been in Simone's life for 3 years. 3 years versus 30. I had been there for the first step, the first fever that hit 104 and sent us to the ER at 2 in the morning. The night Simone called from a college bathroom crying because a boy she loved had stopped loving her back. I had driven 6 hours round trip to sit in a waiting room while she had her appendix out, held her hand through the first miscarriage she'd told no one else about, spent months helping her plan a wedding I'd smiled through even though I knew Marcus wasn't right for her. And I was the one who needed to reschedule. I blew out the birthday candles one by one, all 40 of them, plus the one to grow on. I didn't cry, something settled in my chest instead, something quiet and certain, the way ice forms, slowly and without any drama at all. The next morning I woke up before 6 without an alarm. I lay in bed for exactly 4 minutes looking at the ceiling, and then I got up and went to my desk. There was a letter I needed to write. My mother had left me this house. Not just the building, everything in it. The furniture she'd collected over 50 years, the china we'd used for every holiday meal, the jewelry box in her bedroom that held pieces going back to my great-grandmother. When my parents' estate was settled, my brother and I had agreed. He got the lake cabin, I got the house and its contents. It had all felt so permanent at the time. Like bedrock. I had a will. It was 7 years old, drafted the year Simone got married, when everything still felt like it was moving in the right direction. In it, she inherited everything. The house, the contents, my retirement accounts, the investment portfolio I'd been quietly building since my divorce came through. I pulled the document out of the fireproof box in my closet and read it in the early morning light. Then I picked up my phone and searched for estate attorneys near me. Before I called anyone, though, I did one other thing. I went to my mother's writing desk in the front room, the small maple one with the brass pulls that she'd had since before I was born. I opened the center drawer and found the box of correspondence cards she'd kept there, cream-colored with a small monogram, the kind nobody uses anymore. I took one out. I also took out a photograph. It was in a silver frame on the bookshelf, the one taken at Simone's wedding reception. The three of us, Simone, Marcus, and me, arms around each other in the garden behind the venue. I was laughing at something just outside the frame. Simone had her head tilted against my shoulder. I opened the back of the frame, took the photo out. I don't know exactly what I was thinking in that moment. I think I wasn't thinking so much as knowing, the way your body sometimes knows something before your mind catches up. I went to the kitchen drawer, found the scissors, and with the same steady hands I'd used to pipe those roses the night before, I cut Marcus out of the photograph, not messily, cleanly. The kind of cut that says, this was a decision, not an accident. I put the photo back in the frame without him in it. It looked fine, better, honestly. Then I wrote on the back of the correspondence card in my mother's favorite blue ink, I set a table for the people who matter most. Now I'm setting the rest of my life the same way. I tucked the card into an envelope with the cutout piece, just that single trimmed rectangle of paper, and addressed it to their house. I mailed it on my way to the attorney's office. Sandra Okafor had been practicing estate law in Phoenix for 22 years. She had degrees on the wall and a way of listening that made you feel like your situation was neither surprising nor shameful. I'd found her through my financial advisor, who'd said she was the best in town. Tell me what you're working with and what you'd like to change, she said, setting her legal pad on the desk between us. I told her about the house. The investment accounts, roughly $340,000 accumulated over the last decade through consistent contributions and one very good decision about Apple stock in 2019. My mother's jewelry, which I'd had appraised 2 years ago at just over $28,000. The contents of the house, some of which were genuinely valuable antiques. Everything currently goes to my daughter, I said. I want to change that. Sandra's expression stayed even. What kind of change? She gets a trust. Conditional. If she maintains a meaningful relationship with me, defined as at least 2 in-person visits per year, real ones, not obligatory appearances, the trust pays out when she turns 40. If she doesn't meet that threshold in any given year, the year's distribution is forfeited. If contact ceases entirely for more than 3 consecutive years, the trust dissolves. That's enforceable with the right language, Sandra said, making notes. And if it dissolves? The house goes to Habitat for Humanity. They can sell it, use it, whatever serves them best. I'd looked them up the night before. They had an active chapter 20 minutes from my house and a funding gap I'd read about in the local paper. My investment account split between 2 scholarships, one for community college students who are first generation, one for women over 40 re-entering the workforce after caregiving gaps. Sandra's pen paused. That last one, is that personal? Everything I'm doing today is personal, I said. She smiled briefly and wrote it down. What about your ex-husband? Any claims? None. The house was left to me by my parents. The investments are entirely in my name. My divorce settlement was finalized 18 months ago. He has no standing and personal property, furniture, jewelry, heirlooms. This was the part I'd thought about longest. My mother's jewelry, the garnet drop earrings, the pearl bracelet, the cameo brooch she wore to church for 40 years, those deserved somewhere better than a storage unit or an estate sale. The significant pieces go to the Women's History collection at the University Museum. I've already been in contact with their curator. Actually. I'd emailed the night before and received a response by this morning. She's particularly interested in the mid-century pieces. Sandra finished writing and looked up. I want to ask you something outside my professional scope. Go ahead. Are you doing this in the heat of the moment, or have you been moving toward this for a while? I thought about it genuinely. The birthday was yesterday, but the specific loneliness of being in the room and somehow not in the room, of being technically present in someone's life and functionally invisible, that had been building for 2 years. The holidays where Marcus decided where they went, and somehow it was never here. The Mother's Days that turned into brunches with her other family. The way my calls had started going to voicemail and being returned 3 days later, if at all. I've been watching it happen for a while, I said. Yesterday just made it legible. Sandra nodded. Then let's do this carefully. She charged a $100 to $200 retainer. I wrote the check without hesitation. On the way out, I asked her to send formal notification to Simone and Marcus, not the full will, just a certified letter confirming they had been removed as direct beneficiaries and that any future inheritance would be contingent. She said it would go out by the end of the week. I drove home with the windows down even though it was November and the air in Phoenix still had that dry cold bite after dark. It felt clarifying against my face. 4 days later, my college friend Denise sent me a text. Saw Cheryl's Instagram, the birthday party photos. Your daughter's in all of them. I knew about the Instagram. Cheryl had a public account she updated constantly. The kind built around a lifestyle that looked like it had been art-directed. The birthday party photos were exactly what I'd expected. Professional-looking lighting from those rented Edison bulbs people put up for outdoor dinners, everyone in coordinating outfits, the dessert cart front and center with a sign that said Happy 30th, Simone, in gold script. In one photo, Cheryl had her arm around Simone with a caption that read, "Celebrating this one like she's always been mine. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose you." 47 comments. 312 likes. I enlarged the photo on my phone. There in the background, I could see serving pieces I recognized. A large hammered silver bowl that had belonged to my mother. A set of cream pitchers from my grandmother's kitchen. My ex-husband had taken them in the divorce, arguing they were gifts to the household rather than personal property. Our mediator had split the decision. I'd let it go. I was done letting things go. I didn't post anything that night. I waited 2 days until Sunday evening, when engagement on social media tends to peak. Then I posted a single photo. It was one I'd taken myself that birthday evening. Not of the food, not of the setup, but of the cake. Just the cake. Sitting in the center of the table, all 40 candles still unlit, in a house that was completely quiet. The light was the kind that makes everything look a little aching. The caption was 8 words, made it with 30 years of love, 8 alone, no names, no context, no invitation for drama. Within an hour, my neighbor Kay had commented, then my former colleague from the nonprofit where I'd worked in my 30s, then people I hadn't spoken to in years, connecting threads I hadn't pulled. My ex-husband grew up here. Marcus had gone to college here. In a metro area of 5 million people, certain social circles are still remarkably small. By Monday morning, the post had been shared 61 times. I didn't check it obsessively. I went about my day. I had coffee on my back porch, returned some emails, took a long walk through the neighborhood where I'd grown up. I called my brother and talked to him for the first time in 3 weeks. It was Tuesday when Simone called. Mom. Her voice had the texture of someone who had been awake too long. What is that post? It's a photo of your birthday cake. You know what I mean. Marcus's sister called me. His mom called me. People are sending me the link. I posted a photo of a cake I baked, I said. That's all. You're making us look terrible. I sat with that for a moment. The thing about being made to look terrible is that usually someone has to do something terrible first. Simone, I said, I didn't write a caption about your stepmother's house. I didn't name anyone. I didn't explain anything. I put up a photo of a cake in an empty room because that's what happened. It's manipulative. Do you know what I did on your birthday? I started cooking at 8 in the morning. I made the lemon cake, 3 layers, the real curd, the way you've asked for it since you were 6. I made the short ribs. I set the table. I waited until 6:15 before I called because I was trying not to seem desperate, and then Marcus answered and told me you were at your real family's house. Silence. He said that? Her voice had shifted slightly, word for word. Then he said you'd reschedule. More silence. Then, Mom, I didn't know he said it like that. I believe you, I said. And I did, actually. That was the exhausting part. I believed that Simone was being pulled in directions she didn't always control. But belief doesn't mean consequence. Can you take it down? No, Mom, Simone. There are things I need to tell you that have nothing to do with the post. I kept my voice level. I've made changes to my estate. You'll be receiving a certified letter this week. I need you to read it carefully, and then, when you're ready, I'd like for us to have a real conversation about what kind of relationship we're going to have going forward. The pause was long enough that I heard her breath. What did you change? Read the letter, I said gently. Call me when you have. I ended the call and sat for a while in the quiet of my kitchen. That weekend, I drove to the University Museum and met with the curator, a woman named Dr. Ashworth who had a meticulous eye and a deep knowledge of women's material culture in the American Southwest. I'd brought my mother's jewelry box, the whole thing, and we spent 90 minutes going through it piece by piece. The cameo brooch dated to the 1930s. My grandmother had worn it to every formal occasion she'd attended for 60 years, including my mother's wedding. Dr. Ashworth held it under her loupe for a long time. This is significant, she said. Do you have provenance documentation? I had photographs, letters, and my grandmother's handwritten inventory of her personal possessions, a document she'd created in 1978 and updated twice. Dr. Ashworth looked at it like I'd handed her a small treasure, which I suppose I had. We agreed on a display that would contextualize the pieces within the history of women's domestic life in post-war Arizona. There would be a small placard. My grandmother's name, my mother's name, my name, donated in honor of the women who carried these things forward, and in recognition that some legacies are too important to leave to chance. Are you sure? Dr. Ashworth asked, the way everyone asked me that week. I've been the keeper of these things for 15 years, I said. Here they'll be seen. Here they'll matter. She shook my hand with both of hers. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't been able to name since my divorce, a sense of authorship, like I was finally the one deciding what my story said. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. The certified letter arrived at Simone and Marcus's house on a Wednesday. I know because the return receipt came back to me on Friday. Marcus's name was on the signature line. Simone called that Saturday morning. We talked for 2 hours. The longest we'd talked in probably 3 years, she cried. I didn't, but I wanted to. She said things I needed to hear, and I said things she needed to hear, and neither of us pretended that the conversation fixed everything, because it didn't. But it was real, and real was something. What I learned from her in pieces was this. Marcus had been quietly reshaping her loyalties for years, small things, framing my calls as stressful, describing my parenting as overbearing, positioning Cheryl's household as lighter, easier, more fun. He'd done it so gradually, she hadn't noticed the cumulative drift until she was standing in Cheryl's backyard on her 30th birthday with a glass of champagne, and something had felt slightly off, and she hadn't known why until she got home and saw my post. Made it with 30 years of love. 8 alone. 8 words. I didn't know it had gotten that bad, she said. I thought you were fine. I wasn't fine, I said. I just didn't want to make it harder for you. That was the thing no one tells you about being a devoted mother. Sometimes the very thing you do to protect them, staying quiet, Staying steady, not making a fuss, can look from the outside exactly like not caring. I told her about the estate changes, all of them. Not to punish her, but because she deserved honesty. I'm not changing the conditions, I said, because they're not a punishment, they're just a description of what a relationship looks like. One visit a year, real ones. That's not a burden, that's just being in each other's lives. She agreed. She actually agreed. What I didn't know when we got off the phone was that Cheryl's Instagram post, the one captioned "Family isn't always blood," had quietly started attracting a different kind of attention. Someone's had screenshot it alongside my cake photo and posted them together with a simple caption. One of these people showed up. That post had circulated through the same Phoenix social networks where people knew my ex-husband's name, knew my daughter's planner, knew the neighborhood I grew up in. Cheryl's comments had filled up with questions, polite at first, then less so. My ex-husband called me for the first time in a year to tell me it was creating problems. I didn't do anything, I said, which was true. Your post started it. My post was a photo of a birthday cake. I paused. If it's creating problems for Cheryl's brand, that's between Cheryl and the choices she made. He hung up. I made tea. The following spring sling, Simone came to visit. Just her. She drove up on a Saturday morning, and we spent the day together the way we used to before Marcus and before Cheryl and before all of it became so complicated. We planted tomatoes in the raised bed my father had built before he died. We made lunch from whatever was in the refrigerator. We watched a movie on the couch with a blanket and didn't say much and didn't need to. When she was leaving, she stood at the door for a long moment. "I'm sorry I missed my birthday," she said. "I know. Was the cake good?" I had actually eaten a piece that night, sat alone at the table in the candlelight and eaten a single slice of lemon layer cake with a fork and a glass of Prosecco, and it had been exactly as good as I'd made it. "It was the best one I ever made," I said. She hugged me so hard I felt it in my spine. By the time the holidays came around, I had stopped thinking about revenge, because I realized, somewhere in the middle of all of it, that I had never really been pursuing revenge at all. What I had been pursuing was the thing you stop reaching for when you've spent too many years making yourself small to fit into spaces where you were only ever tolerated. The right to take up room. The right to say this is what I need without apologizing for needing it. The right to stop setting a beautiful table for people who were never planning to show up. I decorated the house the way I wanted that December. No compromises on the tree, no muted colors for anyone's aesthetic preferences, no anxiety about whether the menu would please the most difficult guest. I lit a fire, I cooked what I loved, and I invited the people who had shown up. Kay from next door, my brother and his wife who'd driven in from Tucson, Simone, who sat across from me at the table where I'd once eaten alone. My mother's silver candlesticks were on the table, the good china. The lace tablecloth that had been in storage for 2 years because it had started to feel like evidence of a life I was failing to maintain. It didn't feel like that anymore. Some people spend decades believing that love is something you earn by never asking for anything. I spent a long time believing that too. What I know now, sitting at the head of my own table, in the house that was left to me, surrounded by people who drove here on purpose, is that love that requires you to disappear isn't love. It's a performance where you've been cast in the wrong part. I finally stopped performing, and the table, the real one, the one I actually wanted, turned out to have exactly the right number of seats.